Number 10 has refused to back Chancellor Rachel Reeves' claim that the EU is more important to Britain than the United States, and instead said both are incredibly important to us and we treat both with enormous respect. Of course, this follows the Chancellor's comments where she said our trading relationship with Europe is arguably even more important because they are our nearest neighbours and trading partners. The timing of this comment is what we call awkward. She's preparing to meet the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in Washington today as she attempts to progress on a potential trade agreement. Could she not have just kept her mouth shut just for a short time until she had done the deal? I can now speak to GBNews political editor Christopher Hope and former Conservative Charlie Rowley. Christopher Hope, I'll come to you first, and the Chancellor with her comments which are somewhat ill-timed, even if she thinks that.
Well, are they ill-timed? I mean, she's trying to get a deal with America right now. If you're trying to get a deal with one party, you maybe talk up the other party to make them negotiate harder. That could be a different way of arguing
Not
ill-timed
remarks. In their house,
remarks.
though, do you know what I mean?
Well, I'm meeting Scott Bessent shortly, who's the Trade Secretary. But she said, didn't she, that I understand why there's so much focus on our trading relationship with the US. But actually, the relationship with Europe is arguably even more important than our nearest neighbour and trading partners. If you're trying to do a deal, trading over some goods, arguably you try and big up the opponent to get a better deal. I only plant the thought there.
No.
I'd never say no more than that. The bigger picture is Brexit. Where does it take us? We had Ursula von der Leyen, who's the European Union president, yesterday with the Prime Minister Keir Starmer. That's pitch rolling, preparing the ground. Charlie knows all this from his time in government, ahead of this big summit next month. And what's fascinating is how the language is changing. Now, we know what the Labour triple lock is on Brexit, no return to the single market, customs union or freedom of movement, but they're just nibbling away at the edge of that, I think, with the 18 to 30s. It looks like there'll be some deal to allow those younger people, younger adults, to go to and fro between the European Union and the UK as part of this deal. You're shaking your head, Nana. Don't panic, because Yvette Cooper's keen on a one-in, one-out idea. So one Brit leaves, one European Union person arrives like a revolving door. But the language today from number 10, this is about return. This is not about return to the EU, but we will not be defined by the argument of the past. And that, to me, says so much. They recognise where Brexit was. They're trying to create a new Brexit for the late 2020s.
I can just see Yvette Cooper now with a little people counter. If she could start with those coming across the channel and they could tell us the actual numbers, then I have a little bit more confidence. Charlie?
Well, I think that's absolutely right. That's what people ultimately, I think, will care about. But they'll also care about the treatment that the UK has received from the EU. So the idea that, in 2025, you're sitting in here in April going into May, defence and security is one of the top issues. And we've got France saying that they're not really going to do any kind of trade relationship with the UK because they want more of our fishing stock or want to come into it. That's not a way to be treated. So I don't see how Rachel Reeves is in any kind of position to, curry favour, as it were, with the EU. I think she can't lose any friends at the minute because of the way the economy is going. Growth has halved. The projections from the IMF in last week weren't particularly supportive. So you've got to have everybody as your friend on side if you want to do a trade deal and get the economy growing. But when it comes to Brexit, as I say, I don't think the UK got particularly good treatment from the EU. So we've got to flex our muscles going into these negotiations. We've got to tell them, what we stand for, what we want from them, and if they want more of a fluidity between when it comes to the mobility scheme. So if they want, I think we've suggested that there might be a cap at some point of the numbers of people. It might be a one-in, one-out scheme. That's certainly what the Home Office want. But if the Treasury wants a more fluid approach, if they want more people to be able to have the free movement, then that is Brexit through the back door.
And how's it going to work? Because currently, people arriving in the EU, they pay money to access the NHS surcharge. I think £800 or £600. Yeah, a lot of money for those on lower incomes. The hospitality sector, they want more young people to work in bars. That's a less attractive option, it seems, for British workers. Let's discuss that on a different day, maybe. So you can see why employers want it, but the politics is difficult, and that's why the one-in, one-out idea means that net migration won't go up. You're still shaking your head now. You're not impressed.
I can't see them being able to administer anything. This will be a disaster and it will end up with more people coming to this country, and they still haven't got a handle on the people coming across via the boats. When they stop the boats, or they tell us how many people are in the hotels and how much money all that's costing, then we can consider a one-in, one-out. But right now, I think this country actually needs to hold all of it.
Well, I think this is part of the problem. I mean, back in the days, when Chris mentioned it, under the last Tory government, we had COVID, we had Brexit, we had, a government that had a pretty big in tray of things to do. This government has got a pretty big in tray as well when it comes to the economy, when it comes to defence and security, when it comes to Ukraine. It can't be getting sidetracked or taking on too much, I think, around the edges. So, talking about, the trans debate that we've just obviously heard, and the PM has had to sort of row back on that. We're now talking about a one-in-one out scheme for 18 to 30. These are small chips in comparison to the big things that the government has got.
Immigration is one of the big things.
And that's central.
So anything that is a problem that doesn't mean, because he must bring down net migration through this parliament. He said he would do it. Wouldn't give us a figure. If he doesn't do that, he's toast at the next election.
It's a case of, look over there, the shiny thing. Don't look at the people coming across by the boats.
It's 40,000 a year, isn't it? But compared to nearly a million arriving here legally, it's a pimple compared to the bigger figure.
Well, maybe that is a point, but then that is what's costing us money. So the people who come here legally appear to have some means to support themselves. We're not necessarily housing them, but we know that we're housing people who come here via dinghy. We know that they go straight to hotels, and that is the thing that's costing us between 8 to 10 million a day.
Millions a year.
Yeah, and the taxpayer doesn't want to pay that. I don't want to pay it. Do you want to pay it? But what about the lovely Rachel Reeves? She is in the US looking to do a good trade deal. You must know what kind of thing will be going on in the background in Westminster after the comments that she made.
Well, you have to flatter, I think, this administration. You have to be outside. And to be fair to Keir Starmer, he seems to have a pretty good relationship with the US. There doesn't seem to be any criticism so far. Obviously, I think extending that state visit to Donald Trump has helped some way. But, as Donald Trump, I think, has said many a time in a different circumstance, but, we don't hold the cards. And I think nobody holds the cards apart from Donald Trump, it seems, at the minute. So getting a trade deal, I think, will be a key. It will be seen as a success for the government because of, obviously, British Steel that we've seen, the instance there, the takeover there, the UK government's had to step in. It will want to make sure that its car production and its car manufacturers are able to still export to the US. I'm not a trading expert, but I'm a little bit sceptical because I know the Rolls-Royce and the Land Rovers that we sell to the US, they're quite the high-end market, so I'm pretty sure those celebs rolling around Beverly Hills won't mind an extra charge. So I wouldn't overplay and I wouldn't understate either, but I wouldn't overplay that particular sector. But obviously there's huge amounts that needs to be talked about. But
I mean, the politics is pressure will grow. Next week we're expecting this first deal to be signed with South Korea. That was signalled last night in the Oval Office by Donald Trump and his team. So when that happens, when others start getting their trade deals, pressure starts to grow on this government, saying, well, why are you not exploiting the so-called special relationship, getting a deal for us and for our car manufacturers, our steel makers?
Yeah, well, let's bring in Chief Political Correspondent Aubry Aligretti and see what they have to say. So, Aubrey, where do you stand with all of this then? Rachel Reeves visiting the US and then making comments that if you were wise, you probably wouldn't make. It's like insulting somebody in their home, pointing out that a piece of furniture they have in there isn't particularly nice. Do you know what I mean? Do you think that she's perhaps made a bit of a faux pas?
She probably didn't intend for the comments to come out quite that way and be received as they have. And indeed, she's been on this sort of charm offensive in the last few days. She's been on a variety of sort of Trump-supporting media outlets, giving interviews, and she's been very sympathetic to the case that the UK and Europe doesn't spend enough on defence. Indeed, she's even been suggesting that the UK and Europe should coordinate better defence spending, likening it to individual states and saying, well, they don't sort of spend incrementally their own amounts on defence. So I think she's definitely been trying to curry favour ahead of that meeting. But I think she's probably recognising the sort of reality of the situation, which is that the EU is the UK's largest trading partner. And I can't help but think that she might have heard a little bit the message from Labour MPs who were lining up yesterday in Westminster Hall for what seemed like a sort of 2-hour love-in, where they were talking about how much they wanted closer ties with the EU and for those to extend just beyond the trading relationship.
Let's be honest, she's put her foot in it, hasn't she? Really, she has. It's all very well doing that, but she's got to be a diplomat. And if she's in that country, just like when Donald Trump said he can't then go to Putin and be horrible, about Putin when he's meeting with Zelensky and all of that. So I think she needs to work a little bit harder on this. But what do you make of Yvette Cooper then saying that we can have a one-in, one-out style sort of youth mobility scheme? This is what they're sort of contemplating at the moment.
Absolutely. Yvette Cooper I think, feels the responsibility to ensure that net migration comes down and that Labour isn't, punished in the same way politically as the Conservatives were for sort of keeping it at sky high record levels as it has been in recent years. She's also certainly feeling the pressure from Labour MPs in reform-leaning seats, where Reform came second at the last election, who privately sort of been telling me over the last 24 hours they think the idea is, completely toxic, that they don't think it's the sort of stuff that the government should be talking about. So this is probably something that ministers intended to be conducted quite quietly. They have previously denied that they were going to look at this youth mobility scheme, but it seems that they are open to such an option if they can get this one in, one out idea across the line.
And the maths doesn't really add up, does it? One in, one out, that equals zero. So it's not really bringing net migration down whatsoever, is it really? I mean, it's just...
Well, I mean, obviously the government says that it wants to increase opportunities for skills. So if young people want to go abroad for a year to sort of get an extra qualification or do some studying abroad, then they think that's great. But the UK is looking for access to 27 markets. The EU is looking from 27 markets for access to one. And so there will naturally be, a sort of greater burden placed on the UK in that instance. That's why Yvette Cooper is trying to hold the line so firmly that it has to be one in, one out. And also, look at the way that these numbers are going to be calculated. If these people are only here for 12 months at a time maximum, not sort of 3 years potentially here doing a sort of full course at university, then they won't be counted in the net migration numbers because they'll be out the country by the time that 12-month sort of deadline is hit. But yeah, there are much broader measures the government's going to have to look at if it wants to pull those big levers and actually reduce net migration overall, rather than just keeping it, as you said, static.
Well, I will believe them when they work out how many people have come here via dinghy. Aubrey Aligretti, thank you very much. He's a political correspondent at The Times. Christopher, let's just quickly switch to Ed Miliband. Because he didn't really want to talk to GB News yesterday when he was doing the rounds. And are we going to get his company on the channel at some point?
Yes, we're in talks. I last spoke to him at the COP29, the COP summit, the environment summit in Baku. I chased him down in these huge cavernous halls, and he got 5 minutes on GB News. And that was the last time he appeared in the channel. And it kind of annoys me that he won't do the morning round on a channel with all our viewers, tens of thousands of viewers who want to hear from him about what he planned for them. He wouldn't come on yesterday on your breakfast show. No. They said it was a limited group of broadcasters they were doing in that meet, but they recognise that he hasn't been on for a bit, and he's going to be on very shortly on GB News. More to be revealed after the local elections as a result of my twittering and talking to you about this on air.
Oh, that's good, because I'd love to hear what he's
What would you ask him, Nana?
I think the first thing I'd ask him would be, do you actually believe carbon capture really works? Because that's a £22 billion waste of money, and it hasn't worked anywhere it's been tried.
Great question. I'll make a note.
Okay. Right, thank you very much. Christopher Hope and also Charlie Rowley, thank you so much.